Fire.
We take an oath to welcome them home and to provide for them when they're home.
Little did we know that, our own leadership was knowingly poisoning us.
They haven't met a war they won't sign up for, and they haven't met a veteran they won't screw over.
These people played God with my life. They knew I had been exposed.
These are men and women, mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers.
This bill gives the mechanism to finally pay for the true cost of war, the human cost of war.
Fire.
Hi, welcome to Legal News Hour, news that makes you smarter. I'm Christine Haas.
Hopefully this is going to be life-altering. Hopefully this is going to be life-improving. We hope this is also going to finally allow them to know that we heard you after all these years and we're going to do what's right.
Today we're looking into contaminated drinking water at one of the largest Marine bases in the country, Camp Lejeune in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Millions of veterans and their families were exposed to toxins over the course of several decades. And of course, that's wreaking havoc on their health and their lives as a result. Veteran Jerry Ensminger spends his days remembering his past and counting his blessings.
I was a drill instructor at Parris Island. I trained over 2,000 new Marines, or had my hands in the training of over 2,000 new Marines while I was there. And, I instilled in them, this is what really infuriates me. I instilled in them our motto and our slogan, Semper Fidelis, yeah. Unfortunately, it's a one-way street.
That slogan is something Jerry, a father of four and a Marine, truly believes in spite of the fact that his daughter Janie lost a courageous battle with leukemia at 9 years old in 1985, a direct result of his service to his country. Do you regret it?
In some ways, yes. I'm still proud of, my career, but I am also dismayed, especially what happened with Janie and what happened at Camp Lejeune. We were there from 1973 to 75. When you're in the Marine Corps, people are getting deployed all the time. And moving your family on base was kind of like a relief. It took some, stress off of you. When you were gone, at least you knew your family was on base and it was, you thought they were safe. Little did we know that, our own leadership was knowingly poisoning us.
Master Sergeant Ensminger spent more than a quarter of a century in the Marine Corps. All of his children were born while he served in the military. But Janie is the only one who was conceived, carried, and born during his stint at Camp Lejeune. That's where he and his family were exposed to water contaminated with chemicals that contributed to his daughter's cancer diagnosis. And Ensminger is far from alone. Mike Partain is the son and grandson of Marine vets. He says he was born while his dad was assigned to Camp Lejeune, something he rarely thought about in his adult life. That is, until he was diagnosed at age 39 with a rare form of male breast cancer.
I don't drink, I don't smoke, I've never done drugs. And here I am with a disease that is nowhere in my family. And I, like Jerry was saying, you wonder, well, what happened? What did I do?
In addition to strange cancers, another thing is prevalent among families who served and trained at Camp Lejeune: child deaths. Hundreds of kids dying from strange birth defects, unusual cancers, or even an unusually large number of stillbirths. So what's causing this? Solvents. Chemical compounds leaked into the soil and groundwater, both by a nearby business and by the Marines themselves.
These people played God with my life. They knew I had been exposed. They knew that we were there during the contamination as early as the 90s.
But trying to prove that was another story altogether.
Our fight, I likened it to trying to get an accurate account of what actually transpired aboard the base during the contamination period is kind of like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall.
I served in the Marine Corps. My dad served in the Marine Corps. My great uncle was in Iwo Jima. The Marine Corps has been something that has always been a part of my life in one way or the other. And even in the civilian world, like I said, has continued to carry with me. And I just want to make sure that they get justice and that they're taken care of, because frankly, I know the hell that they've been through in serving this country. And the last thing they should have to do is face all the physical ailments that come with this toxic water supply without the government doing the right thing. And you know, this has been going on for 40 years since the government found out about it, and it still hasn't been made right. And that's why we're here to fight for those individuals and their families and making sure that they're taken care of.
You think, no, I'm going to get shot at, hit, shot at and missed, bombed, you know, get into hand-to-hand combat. That's the type of thing that you think about, but you don't stop and think about being poisoned.
It is absolutely heart-wrenching, but we have one series of clients, is a family that had 3 generations at Lejeune. 3 generations of horrific cancers and medical diagnoses, from the grandfather who was a colonel, from the original client who was also an officer, his children who became officers, 3 generations of Marine Corps officers and their families, some of which have already died from cancer, all at Lejeune.
And the more I started reading about the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, and then the more I started reading about the illnesses and maladies and diseases that these guys were suffering, I started to think, you know, I have some of those symptoms myself. In my case, it was aortic stenosis. I was flabbergasted. Yeah, my ticker's going. I'm only, at that time, I was only, I just turned 68 years old. It was like, that's not supposed to happen until way later on in life.
Because frankly, I didn't know I had a relationship other than I had been at Camp Lejeune. But I didn't know I had any of these problems. And that's one of the differences about being here, is that when I got to talking to Rick, it's actually Rick that tied some knots together for me. My atrial fibrillation, my fatty liver, the fact that I don't feel my feet a lot of mornings. I never put that together. I never knew. Until I got here and started talking to Rick and realizing, wow, not only am I passionate to help others that I've always been, and certainly want to help Marines, but I realized I'm also a victim.
Also, I think it's important for Marines and their families, etc., to realize that, you know, even if you think you're okay now, it might be 2 or 3 years from now that you finally get tested or finally go to the doctor to get evaluated, to get a physical, before you find out that you have a condition. But on this case, the statute of limitations is only 2 years, and we're past halfway through that. I mean, we have less than a year for these Marines and their family and the civilians at Lejeune to be able to file a case. And so if you think, oh, okay, I think I'm fine. Well, if you find out for 3 years from now you have cancer, or you have Parkinson's, or you have heart defects, or you have some of these other issues related to that toxic water, it will be too late at that point to then try to get your grievances filed before government. Now's the time.
You put your faith in us, you've put your trust in the right spot, because we're not going to let you down, period.
Having served in the officer corps when I was a Marine, I've seen that kind of politics. I've seen that kind of kick in the can, and it disgusts me. And so to be part of a group of fighters, part of a group of patriots who want to see someone pay for hurting others, yeah, I'm passionate.
I would just implore everybody who was at Lejeune during that period of time, whether, and if it's not you, maybe it's your family member who you knew was at Lejeune at that period of time, to go get checked out, or to call us and have us help arrange to get you checked out and get medically evaluated to see if you have these conditions and see if we can help you take care of it before it's too late.
During the past 40 years, the U.S. Marine Corps has either refused to claim responsibility or has been slow to recognize a link between the chemicals and cancers, as shown in this congressional hearing in 2010.
I think we were ignorant, quite frankly, of some of the implications. I think we were lulled into a sense of complacency, or at least a lack of urgency, by the fact that we were not out of compliance. And I'm not trying to excuse what happened. I think that there were many, many errors made on behalf of the Marine Corps.
It wasn't until 1997 that Ensminger saw a report on a local news channel that linked toxic water to childhood leukemia like Janie's.
And I had a plate of spaghetti. I was going to get in the living room and watch the evening news, local news. And I came walking into the living room, and the reporter on the TV screen said that the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which is ATSDR, which is part of the CDC, released their public health assessment this week about the contaminated drinking water at Camp Lejeune. And they said, ATSDR wants to do further studies on children who were conceived or born on the base between the years of 1968 and 1985.
And that's when the alarm bells went off?
No. Then they said that they wanted to study these kids for birth defects and childhood cancer, primarily leukemia. I dropped my plate of spaghetti on the living room floor.
Ensminger says that same night he decided to devote his entire life to expose the truth about the toxic water on Camp Lejeune so that Janie's death was not in vain.
When you have a child that's diagnosed with a catastrophic long-term illness, after the shock of the diagnosis wears off, everybody resorts to that one thing. Why? And you never really think that you're ever going to get an answer to it. When I heard that on that TV, it was like God opened the sky up and said, hey, Jerry, here's a glimmer of hope that you're going to get that answer.
Ensminger and Partain founded the group The Few, the Proud, the Forgotten, and continuously fought to expose what the Marine Corps knew and when. To date, their website holds one of the most comprehensive databases of documents pertaining to water testing, surveys, and even evidence of cover-ups by the military in the case of Camp Lejeune.
What the leadership of the Marine Corps did, and their upper-level civilian leadership in the Department of the Navy, and these people need to crawl under a rock.
The group was able to put enough pressure on Congress and the White House to get the Janie Ensminger Act passed in 2012. It established a presumption of service connection for several cancers and illnesses linked to contaminants in the water, and it provided health care to family members of veterans who lived at Camp Lejeune while the water was contaminated.
We have a moral, sacred duty towards our men and women in uniform. They protect our freedom, and it's our obligation to do right by them.
But the Janie Ensminger Act didn't go far enough in making sure veterans and their families were taken care of, and failed to include provisions for monetary compensation. Thousands of lawsuits have been filed against the U.S. military over the years in reference to the toxic water, but have been tossed out by district judges, either claiming the suits don't qualify under the Federal Tort Claims Act of 1946, or saying the statute of limitations had simply run out.
Cancer is not something you get over. It affects you, it affects your loved ones, your kids, your wife, and it has a lot to do with why my marriage fell apart. And to sit there and say, well, bravado, I'm not going to sue. Well, they can't. There's nothing that the government can do to restore my health, to give me back what has been lost. I went from being a young man to an old man. My mom's 80, my father just passed away at 79. Am I going to make it that far?
Both Ensminger and Partain say ultimately holding the Marines responsible for what they did and did not do to fix the water contamination is paramount. That's because they say after laying their lives on the line for our freedom, millions of veterans and their families will never be free from the effects of toxic chemicals.
The Marine Corps betrayed a trust. But until the Department of Defense is held accountable for their actions, this type of behavior will continue.
As you can see, Master Sergeant Ensminger and Mike Partain are just two of potentially millions of veterans who've long suffered as a result of time spent at Camp Lejeune. For decades, the contaminated water has contributed to many adverse health problems, all for Marines, their families, and anybody on base. But what did the military know about the contamination and when? The answer to that question may shock you.
Camp Lejeune was founded back in 1941, just prior to the U.S.'s entrance into World War II. The following year, Marines built and opened the Hadnot Point Water Treatment Facility to service the base. As that base grew, so did the need for housing. In 1951, the Tarawa Terrace subdivision opened on base for 6,200 residents. And in 1952, a state-of-the-art dry cleaner, ABC one-hour dry cleaners, opened in the area. In order to get all the sweat and other stains out of the military dress blues, ABC used a solvent that contained a toxic chemical, PCE, also known as PERC. It is classified as a likely carcinogen by the EPA, but that's not the only chemical they used. As early as 1953, documents show ABC cleaners leaked trichloroethylene, and the EPA says they routinely disposed of PCE through their septic system. This allowed the PCE to seep right into the groundwater and contaminate the water supply for Tarawa Terrace. But they weren't the only ones to blame. In 1953, the Marines dumped TCE and PCE improperly. They also buried several gas drums at the site. This, of course, almost certainly led to issues with drinking water. So many, in fact, that the military brought in a consultant, Dr. Harry Legrand. He did a study on the water supply to Camp Lejeune in 1958.
He found that wells were built on sand, which essentially allowed contaminants to penetrate right into the aquifer. Legrand advised military personnel to mandate frequent inspections and make any repairs right away. Only that didn't happen, and the problems persisted.
In 1970, DDT, trichloroethylene, and calcium hypochlorite were buried in a pit by base officials, further contributing to the contamination. But in 1974, a base order was issued. That order outlined a specific protocol for disposing of hazardous waste on base, but again, no one followed it, and no one was punished for failing to do so. In the 1980s, separate investigations by the Army and the Navy at Camp Lejeune found highly contaminated samples in the potable water supply for Hadnot Point, containing both PCE and TCE, but still, the base itself was not doing any testing of its own.
During those years, study after study proved those solvents were there. Well-known carcinogens had infiltrated the water supply at Camp Lejeune.
In 1985, base officials eventually migrated Tarawa Terrace to a new water supply. But the damage was done. In 1989, the EPA designated both Camp Lejeune and ABC dry cleaning as Superfund sites, or hazardous, abandoned locations that needed to be cleaned up so that they may no longer be a danger to humans.
Victims say it was a step in the right direction, even though the military stopped short of admitting any responsibility.
But it wasn't until 2004 that the Marine Corps finally acknowledged the people living on base weren't told properly about the contamination. Victims say it was a step in the right direction, even though the military stopped short of admitting any responsibility. Over the course of the next 17 years, victims would begin to demand answers and accountability. Starting in 2009, a flurry of lawsuits would be filed and dismissed in U.S. District Court in North Carolina. Then in 2019, the Navy denied more than 4,400 civil claims, claiming immunity under the Federal Tort Claims Act. Lawyers, though, appealed those cases to the U.S. Supreme Court. In the meantime, many began looking to lawmakers for a long-term solution.
Attention Marines, if you served at Camp Lejeune between 1953 and 1987, the water you were drinking was poison. It has proven to cause cancer, Parkinson's, fatty liver, birth defects, and many other medical conditions for you and your family. Call us today, 1-855-JARHEAD-5, or check us out online at jarheadlegal.com. Partner Adam Muery spent 6 years in the Marine Corps as an infantry machine gunner and gives a 25% discount on all fees for Marines. jarheadlegal.com. 1-855-JARHEAD-5. You pay nothing except a percentage of what we win for you. 1-855-JARHEAD-5.
Today, nearly 3.5 million veterans are living with some sort of medical issue that's the direct result of their service, whether it's from exposure to Agent Orange, toxic burn pits, or contaminated water at Camp Lejeune. That's about 1 in every 5 veterans living in America today. But as you've seen today, getting the help that's so necessary and well-deserved hasn't always been possible. That's why several lawmakers set out to change that. But just getting that accomplished was no small feat.
In Washington, D.C., there's always some back and forth. But typically, veterans' health care is one issue that garners bipartisan support.
Our veterans served our country with honor. We have to honor their service.
Earlier this year, the Honoring Our Pact Act seemed to be on a similar course, first introduced on June 17, 2021, by Representative Mark Takano.
We're going to bring the PAC Act to the floor of the House of Representatives.
The bill provides new support for veterans who were exposed to toxins during their service, many of whom were exposed to burn pits in the Middle East and toxic water at Camp Lejeune. Under the bill, anyone who served in certain war zones or at Camp Lejeune for at least 30 days from 1953 and 1987 will be granted something called presumptive benefit status, which will speed up disability payouts and claim payments for 23 respiratory illnesses and cancers.
We took 23 illnesses that we could reasonably connect and say, if you have one of these illnesses, you're entitled to benefits, you and your family.
The PACT Act also lowers the standard of proof required to prove medical conditions are linked to toxic exposure. It also gives veterans of recent wars 5 additional years of medical coverage through the VA, regardless of their health status.
How will the PACT Act influence people who had been at Camp Lejeune?
What the bill allows for Camp Lejeune survivors is to file claims, to literally just kind of that the government has made itself liable through this legislation. We cease to keep it immune from claims, and so we have set up knowledge that the government is going to have to be prepared to make payouts to people who've been injured and suffered as a result of their toxic exposure there during a specific time at Camp Lejeune.
The bill is passed.
But what was thought to be a sure thing was anything but. After passing the House with a vote of 256-174 in March, the bill came to the Senate. Representative Takano says he was pleasantly surprised by how easily the bill sailed through in June.
What's your reaction to what happened then?
I was elated beyond expectation that 84 senators out of 100 would vote for the PACT Act. As you know, it's a 50-50 Senate. So you just do the math, 34 Republican senators joined with all 50 Democratic senators.
On this vote, the yeas are 84, the nays are 14. The bill.
But then a major roadblock. After an 84-14 vote in the Senate, a technicality sent the measure back to the chamber, called a blue slip for a second vote just a couple weeks later. And that's where things ground to a halt. 25 Republican senators inexplicably flipped their votes on the measure, putting passage in jeopardy before the Senate's summer recess. Comedian and activist Jon Stewart was outraged, along with dozens of veterans who were in D.C., all to celebrate the passage of the measure.
Every one of these individuals that has been fighting for years, standing on the shoulders of Vietnam veterans who have been fighting for years, standing on the shoulders of Persian Gulf War veterans fighting for years, Desert Storm veterans, to just get the health care and benefits that they earned from their service. And I don't care if they were fighting for our freedom. I don't care if they were fighting for the flag. I don't care if they were fighting because they wanted to get out of a drug treatment center or it was jail or the army. I don't give it. They lived up to their oath. And yesterday, they spit on it.
The group of PACT Act supporters then staged a protest, even sleeping on the Capitol steps, often in stormy weather, just so they may have a chance to persuade lawmakers to take the measure before summer recess. The reason? They explained that time is the one thing they're running out of.
Danielle, how long have you been here?
20 hours.
Tell us about last night.
I think I saw a Noah floating down at one point in his ark, so it got a little crazy.
You know, we didn't leave. We didn't leave and we're not leaving.
The public seemed outraged at the power play. This, coupled with support from Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other congressional leaders, prompted lawmakers to once again vote on the Honoring Our Pact Act just a few short days later.
On this vote, the yeas are 86, the nays are 11.
This time, the bill passed with a final tally of 86-11.
This motion to concur, the motion is agreed to.
You know, every so often, folks, America lives up to its ideals. And those are days that we savor. Well, today, finally, at long last, America lived up to its ideals by saying to our veterans who have been exposed to toxic chemicals We have your back, finally.
For the victims of the toxic water like Jerry Ensminger and Mike Partain, the vote was the culmination of 25 years of struggle and was certainly cause for a bit of celebration.
When the president of the Senate announced the vote, he's sitting there next to me, and right after they say the nay and there's a silence, you hear this, "Urgh!" That was him. And it echoed throughout the chamber.
This bill gives us the rights that we all put our lives on the line to defend for Americans.
Ensminger, Partain, and Congressman Takano say the bill is the least they can do for millions who fought for our freedom.
What it sends to veterans and their families is more than thank you for your service. It says, you do not have to be anxious anymore about the cost of your health care going forward. You don't have to be anxious about how your families are going to be taken care of. This is the way we say thank you to you, not just with words, but with actions. And I hope it sends a message to another generation of Americans that you live in a country that takes care of those who put on the uniform. And that if this is what you choose to do with your life, America and the American people will have your back.
President Biden, whose son Beau lost his battle with brain cancer back in 2015 following toxic exposure, championed the PACT Act. He signed that bill into law on August 10th.
This law is long overdue, but we finally got it done together. And I don't want to hear the press tell me Democrats and Republicans can't work together. We got it done, and we got it done together. So God bless you all. You are the backbone, the very spine of this country. And may God protect our troops.
As you've seen, the contaminated water at Camp Lejeune has deeply impacted the lives of former service members and their families, even civilian employees who may have worked on the base during the years of contamination. So what should you do if you think you've been affected? First of all, in order to be covered by the PACT Act, you must have been on base for at least 30 days from August 1953 through December 1987, and you must not have been dishonorably discharged from the military. And you must have a diagnosis of one or more of the conditions listed on the screen, ranging from adult leukemia to Parkinson's disease. Those who are impacted are entitled to compensation and health care coverage for the disorders listed. You're going to need to provide your military records showing that you served at Camp Lejeune during that time frame, and any records from your doctor showing that you have that presumptive illness when filing a claim. Lastly, you can file a claim online at va.gov or at a regional VA office in person. And of course, you can always call that number for the helpline that's been running below. Veterans have given so much to our country and our freedom, and now Camp Lejeune veterans and their families have hope that their medical bills and families will be taken care of. Thank you for joining us for this special report on the Legal News Hour. I'm Christine Haas.